I'd only been to the UK before, actually once, for a rugby tour back when I was in high school, and so I really didn't have any idea what I was supposed to be expecting.
The vibrancy of the place is just stunning.
There's this amazing sense of history.
There have been so many great figures who have studied here. It's really, really inspiring.
The connections and the networks of individuals that you get to know here, people who are going to go back to their home countries all across the world, and we're going to be influential, important people.
Studying in the UK can seriously change the course of your life. In this film, some influential Canadians talk about what they got from their time in the UK.
Good stuff. Score try.
My name is Gareth Rees. I'm a British Columbia boy who learned his rugby here and then studied and took his rugby to the UK.
I'm Angela Hewitt, a classical concert pianist. I travel the world playing the piano.
I'm Mark Carney. I'm the Governor of the Bank of Canada and also Chairman of the Financial Stability Board.
My name is Samantha Nutt. I am the founder of War Child Canada, and I am the author of a book called Damned Nations.
You're bringing it back to the story. I'm thinking...
My name is Maureen McKeon. I'm a screenwriter, story editor, and I'm a professor of screenwriting at Sheridan College in Oakville, Ontario.
Never before...
I'm Meharoona Ghani. I'm a published poet and writer. Poetry is something that I've been doing since I was 8 years old.
I'm Matthew Larkin, Director of Music here at Christ Church Cathedral. This is the Mother Church of the Anglican Diocese of Ottawa.
My name is Louise de la Gorgondière, and I am a social anthropologist, and I am currently a professor in anthropology at Carleton University, Ottawa, Canada.
My name is Diane Nalini de Kerkhove. I trained as a scientist, as a physicist, and I'm also a professional jazz singer.
Oh, be a fine girl, kiss me like that, you said.
The UK, from a Canadian perspective, is perhaps culturally the closest cousin that we have. But at the same time, there's enough cultural difference there that you definitely feel like you're arriving in a foreign country when you first get there.
It was because of my time at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine and the experiences that I was gaining there that I was offered the opportunity to volunteer with UNICEF in Somalia. And this was during a second wave of famine that was gripping that country. And that experience, which ended up becoming my master's thesis, set me on a course to work in different war zones around the world, and which ultimately led me to start the organization War Child. So it's not even a stretch to say that that year that I spent in England really profoundly changed the course of my professional career.
I first went to the United Kingdom in 1988 to work in the city. I worked in the city for a couple of years. But it was really only when I came back to study as a Commonwealth scholar at Oxford that I fully understood, to the extent anyone can, fully understood the country, its richness, and certainly the educational experience was remarkable.
Let me start with the obvious. It has been a very difficult year for capital markets.
The intellectual and policy response to the crisis of British authorities has been the most nimble, aggressive, radical even.
My experience in the city helped develop an appreciation for the strengths and the limits of markets and a global outlook, because really the City of London is the center of global finance. Those building blocks were really developed in the UK, the intellectual side, a sense of how far one needs to stretch, the contacts and connections, and also that global, more cosmopolitan outlook that's, in my opinion, essential to succeed in today's world.
I moved here really because I knew that London in particular was such a wonderful city for music. In fact, I think the best in the world. I had come here for summer courses every year since the age of 15. I had done one when I was 12 years old, actually through the Royal Academy of Music in London. And Sir Simon Rattle, conductor of the Billiard and Philharmonic, was one of the other students in that course. A venue like we're in today, Reading Town Hall, there are many such venues up and down the country as well, like Leeds Town Hall. My father came from Leeds, so that's always a very special one for me to play in. They have a wonderful sound and a great character, and you can imagine a choir performance in here. I think the wonderful thing about music in Britain is that there's a lot of amateur music making, which we also have in Canada too, and perhaps that's one of the best links in music that we have. There are a lot of choirs from Canada who come to perform the great cathedrals here. There are youth orchestras who, when they want to go to Europe, the first place they want to come to is Britain.
Go! Low, low, low. Atta boy, great tackle. Good job.
As a Canadian international, I had reached the top of the game in Canada. It was only by going to the UK that I was allowed to be exposed to better players, better competition, and I really learned a lot about the game, particularly before it went professional, the values of the game. In Canada, you pick up a newspaper, it's full of ice hockey players and ice hockey results. I was able to do that and see rugby results and read about rugby stories and learn about the game of rugby.
Lachlan arrives. He realizes that we're pretty close to stealing this ball. So what's Lachlan's job at that point?
You may have noticed by my name, Gareth Rees, that I have some Welsh blood in me. I was picked to play for Canada against Wales in 1993, and it was a victory for Canada. My good mate from Ontario, Al Sharon, scored the winning try, and I was able to convert to win by 2 points. So great day for our family and a great day for Canadian rugby to go to one of the hallowed turfs of world rugby and get a famous result for Canada.
I attended the University of Toronto, was organ scholar of Trinity College for a couple of years, and then moved on to the Royal College of Music in London. It really accentuated the vocation that I have to be part of the British tradition as a church musician, as an organist, in the music that I write. Certainly in Anglican churches like the one where I work, and certainly given my own personal heritage, the connection with Britain and things that are British is extremely strong. I very much write, at least I'd like to think that I do, in the tradition that's been established in the British colleges and churches, and that's really been part of my life, and I continue to work in that tradition now.
So why don't we take a look at the POV shots?
As I
Play a little bit.
grew up and realized that I was really interested in things like writing and music and theater,
Bringing it back to the story.
it became clearer and clearer to me that England was, if you're an English-speaking person, it's one of the places that you really want to go because it's the home of so much of what seems to be part of your culture.
So was it the director's idea?
Basically, the director and DOP stood in the area.
When I talk to my students here and they talk about the things that they like watching on television, inevitably they're going to tell me about some English program that they have recently discovered, even if it's Doctor Who. They're not even aware that it's had all the incarnations that it's had, but they're just blown away by the fact that there's this kind of edgy, intense stuff going on.
There also will be times when you'll see the footage and you'll say, man, they solved a problem I could not solve.
I was able to introduce a couple of students to the UK film and television scene at this conference in Edinburgh, Scotland. That was exciting for me because it was kind of like passing the torch.
At the end of my undergraduate studies, I took a study tour through West Africa and fell in love with Ghana and decided to do my research there. I went to Cambridge University for my PhD, and it was so rewarding in terms of understanding a different culture. Although I had worked in Ghana, but this was a Western culture, not a developing country culture, and it was as much culture shock going to Britain initially as it was to Ghana. I was learning to become an anthropologist, but I was also learning how to become a citizen of the world.
Anarkali. Never before have I noticed my smell. Copper red pollen center Issues around identity and race history is very much a part of my academic work. One of the reasons I chose the University of Sussex Institute of Development Studies was at the time in Canada there wasn't any specific master's degree that focused specifically on gender. I was hesitant about going there to study in an environment that is the center of colonialism. What I experienced were people of so many different backgrounds, all there to interrelate with one another and learn from each other and share their experiences.
The first time I studied in the UK, I was 17 years old, and I was based in a very small village called Giggleswick in North Yorkshire. It was this idyllic setting, but we're right in the middle of the Yorkshire Dales, so you can imagine what winter was like in this 500-year-old school. It was interesting. It was at times cold and bleak, but as my mother told me at the time, it builds character. And so now I think I have probably more character than I could possibly ever want.
I would say I had a much deeper appreciation of the value of central heating, for example. Most fundamentally, though, I met my wife at Oxford, so everything I could ask for.
I have to tell you, if any English people are watching this, your train system is great. And from a Canadian train point of view, your trains are not late. You just don't even know what late is.
I love British comedy. I love the newspapers. These are things that really enrich my life over there, and I really miss them being here in Canada.
Not just a lag, but a cooling down.
I admired the British media's way of sort of laying into their politicians a little bit more. I think the BBC is perhaps a little more hands-on when it comes to asking tough political questions.
Canada is a car country, and the whole time I was in Britain, I never owned a car. I cycled everywhere. And you get to see the landscape in a very different way and the people in a very different way when you're cycling and you're walking constantly.
All the museums, all that's happening in the world of design and fashion, in politics in the world. I mean, it's very, you can't ignore that, I think, when you live here.
Being in Brighton, and I absolutely adored it. The beach was right there, the art scene was amazing, the cultural life was just wonderful.
My life was this incredibly glorious sequence of practicing in the early morning, getting on the bus, getting on the tube, either going to the college or going to Evensong at St. Paul's or the Abbey, or to Vespers at Westminster Cathedral, drinking lots of beer in loads of pubs and eating lots of curry. And that was really my experience, and it was formative. And I can tell you that, most of the repertoire I play today as an organist was repertoire that I learned during that time I was in Britain at the Royal College.
The money that we produce, the notes have Her Majesty on, the most commonly used note, the $20 bill. She's there with pride. Very tight links between the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England.
I do think that there is a certain level of shared history and shared values and shared culture. At the same time, I was really surprised by the differences that do exist between Canada and the UK.
The history of England and Canada, whether it's through business, whether it's through sport, whether it's through culture, is long, ongoing, and I think there's a real, to use a rugby term, a camaraderie there. There's an understanding of the cultures.
By being here and being able to sort of sense that history and really sort of understand how it feels to situate yourself in a long, long historical chain is something that gives you a totally new perspective on how we live at home.
It's a wonderfully spiritual feeling, as well as an artistic one, to be inheritors, if only for a small amount of time, of a tradition which is much greater than we are, much longer than we could possibly live, and will certainly exceed our lifespans.
You'll be having conversations with philosophers, with physicists, with art students, with lawyers, and it's something like that I think really opens up your perspectives.
Writing, theater, film, anything where the language is at the center of it, then that link to England is always going to be extremely important. It's almost one of the essences of study in those areas.
I'm actually modeling my future career on another Oxford grad who's Mark Carney, who's currently the Governor of the Bank of Canada. And so what I'd like to do is following largely in his footsteps is once I finish my PhD here, I'd like to go on, work in the private sector for a number of years and eventually switch into the public sector in Canada.
There's direct and very strong intellectual ties between great universities in our two countries, and I was fortunate to benefit from that by the grace of the British Council.